we got a special guest. Her name is Jamilah Lemieux. She wrote a really, I think, a wonderful piece in Vanity Fair. And you all should go to Vanity Fair and check this out, that talks about Kendrick Lamar, Drake, and this struggle, as you put it, Jamilah, for hip hop's soul. Jamilah, welcome back to Night School. It's good to see you. What made you want to write this piece?
As I say in the piece, I am a longtime fan of Kendrick and a longtime hater of Drake. We have that in common. But, I had to kind of look at some of my own hypocrisy while I was enjoying this battle because, it's a remarkable moment. For the first time, mainstream rappers in any meaningful way are defending girls and women. The only time we've heard this before from mainstream male rappers would be on Tupac's Keep Your Head Up. And both these rappers are charging each other with mistreating women or girls. And so I wonder why it's so easy for us to believe the allegations against Drake. I mean, granted, there's a lot of evidence that he likes very young girls. There's no shortage of footage of him partying with super young girls, including the Jenner sisters. The weird texting thing.
Let's break some of this down for two reasons. One, so the audience has back context. And two, so I don't get sued. First, when you talk about what these allegations are, first, the allegation against Drake is that he dates. When you say very young girls, you mean like, I feel like this is like R. Kelly Touré interview, but how young we talk?
How young do you mean? Meaning that he's been seen partying with girls that were 16, 17, 18 years old.
That's illegal. That's not legal.
Right. There's also the footage of him from some concerts when he was 29, where he was bringing 17-year-old girls on stage, and they would tell him that he was 17, and he would say, "Oh man, but you're so fine, you look so good," and hug and kiss on them. So between that and him texting Millie Bobby Brown when she was, just a young teenager herself, we have enough reason to think something might be up with Drake when it comes to him and young girls. He's even throughout the beef said it himself, like, "Oh, of course I expected the Epstein angle," as if that's a normal thing to expect for yourself. He fired back.
Why did you expect the Epstein?
Why do you expect that? I would never like.
It's not what I would think if I had beef with somebody. I wouldn't think that he, compared me to the world's most infamous pedophile.
No. And Drake fired back against Kendrick and accused him of, among other things, abusing his wife.
Yes.
And so as hip hop fans, many of us have basically said we're riding with Kendrick through this. He's the obvious champion of the beef. But that means that we're saying we don't believe the allegations against Kendrick. And I'm not saying that I believe them myself. I'm admitting in the article that I too have decided that I don't believe Drake, and I don't have any evidence against Kendrick in the way that we have evidence against Drake.
Is it purely just a lack of evidence, like on some court stuff, or do you have an investment in believing that Mr. Morale, is that, and the Big Steppers is really that guy, that he has that family unit, that he is who he says he is?
I think it's both. I think for the vast majority, we want to believe that Kendrick is who he's presented himself to us to be, which is a family man. And then for me personally, there is that lack of evidence. If there was a woman who'd come forward and say, "Hey, Kendrick harmed me," I would feel very differently about him. And that's not to say that it's easy for women to come forward, especially if we're talking about his wife or his fiance who he's still with, so it's completely unfathomable.
How long have you been engaged, by the way?
A long time.
That might be another story for the time. I'm not being shady and nothing like that, but far be it from me to judge anybody. But I, as someone who got married at 45, but or 44, but it's an interesting piece of it that Drake also brought up with Kendrick was not just the abuse allegations, but the whole, you act like you got a wholesome family, but you really doing some other stuff out of town that and that she's also, that her baby is by Dave, Dave Free. To me, it was also very housewivesy like. It was very there was a lot of dry snitching, a lot of allegations, things that get stereotypically assigned to women, I found in this debate too. Which also to me played into some of the gender politics of this. Suddenly, it's the men accusing each other of BBLs and cheating and having secret side deals, etc. It just felt very different to me.
It is, but it isn't. Because when we think about some of the rap beefs we've seen throughout history, Tupac claiming to have slept with Faith when she was married to Biggie, And Jay-Z and Nas's whole beef starts over a woman.
Yeah, you know? That's true. That felt different though.
Oh, it definitely felt different because they weren't necessarily talking about the relationships with the women. They weren't talking about what kind of husband Biggie was or what kind of wife Faith may have been.
Right. And they weren't snitching. It's one thing to say, I slept with her. It's another thing to say, yo, I heard so-and-so slept with her, or dry snitching. Hey, I heard you're sleeping with somebody else. I mean, that's another, that's, again, not making a judgment about it, but it just seems like a different moment. To me, it was all the Drake stuff. To me, Drake introduced all of this behavior to the conversation. But anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked from your central thesis, which I think is a really important one, which is that this was a moment where Black men in particular were standing up and defending women.
And that's unique. You know, I mean, arguably they were both doing it. Now, if Drake is just straight up lying about Kendrick abusing his wife and stepping out on her, and, you know, Kendrick has talked about his struggles with infidelity in the past. So we can't, you know, it's not hard to imagine that there was some truth to that, at least, you know, if not present time in the past. But, you know, like I think about Not Like Us being, this is beyond the conversation about the biggest diss record ever. And Damon Young pointed this out to me yesterday. Like, when you talk about Not Like Us, we're talking about like the Macarena or Who Let the Dogs Out in terms of just how massive a song that it is, right?
It is a monster. It's still number one, right? It's been number one since May.
Yeah. You know,
that's crazy.
That's crazy. It's going to be one of the biggest rap records of all time, you know, and on this record, a man is accused of disrespecting women, you know, having a thing for young girls. And, you know, and we're all singing along to this. And so it makes me wonder, like, one, how does Drake come back?
That's why I'm laughing, by the way. I'm not laughing at the content. I'm laughing at just, I mean, when you talk about a comeuppance for Drake, if you're a Drake hater, you got to be in heaven right now. When every time you go outside, you got whole nightclubs, you got whole stadiums, you got music videos all clowning him. You got people who don't even know what it means calling him a freaky ass nigga. You got people, I mean, they're saying pedophile like it's not the worst thing you could call somebody. I'm not saying that's okay. You know what I mean? I'm just saying this is a whatever you think 50 Cent did to Ja Rule, this is that times 100, is it not?
Absolutely. I mean, no rapper has ever, I think, been annihilated this way in a beef. You know, like there's never been such a decisive victory where the other person was just so thoroughly humiliated. You know, people will argue all day over who won, Jay-Z or Nas. And granted, most people would probably say Nas, but there's still a strong case for Jay-Z. You can't arguably say that Drake won in this beef or even really scored any points. I mean, people don't believe the things that he's saying, you know, and he's just, I mean, the way Kendrick broke down Drake's relationship to Atlanta rappers, how can them ever work with him again? Like, what does that look like? Do you really want to be the ones to put BBL Drizzy in your video after, you know, you were listed as being complacent and helping him to be a colonizer? And I just think about, you know, brands, right? Like Drake is nominated for Kids' Choice Awards at Nickelodeon, right?
Not no more.
That ceremony this year.
No, that would be the joke will write itself. He literally cannot show up to the Kids' Choice Awards ever. Wow. So does this change the game for how we think and talk about gender politics and hip hop? I mean, will we see a trend of rappers who now, when they come after dude, they won't just come after dude for being a snitch. They won't just come after dude. They won't just use homophobic slurs. That maybe, just maybe, they'll critique people for the type of partner they are, the type of parent they are. Because that's the other piece of this, right?
Yes.
Pusha T starts this, you know, with the story of Adidon, when he comes after Drake, you know, you are hiding a child, right? And then Kendrick follows up by calling him a deadbeat. He does Meet the Grams, where he literally has a conversation with the son, the mom. I mean, he breaks down the whole dysfunctional family structure, but a lot of it hinges on him being the product of a deadbeat dad and him becoming a deadbeat dad. He also accuses Drake of having a second secret kid, which also seems like something that was disproven, or at least not proven. So I mean, Kendrick has some questionable allegations on his side. It just seems like we don't care as much.
We don't care. And part of that is because Kendrick outperformed. You know, if Drake had somehow been the better rapper, made better music, maybe Certified Pedophile wouldn't have hit as hard as it did, you know? But it does make me wonder, like, going forward, there is the possibility here for this being a new moment in how women are discussed in hip hop in terms of holding rappers to standards for how they treat women. That if I'm in a battle with you, if I got an issue with you, part of what I can bring up against you is that you mistreat girls. Because you look at the numbers of allegations of violence against rappers that I name in the story, and there are many, many of them. I forgot some. There's so many of them. You know, that's not usually been used against any of these guys, right? Many of those guys that were mentioned in that story have been, oh, my cat wants to be on camera. Many of those guys that were listed as having allegations of violence against women in that story have been in their own rap beefs. And the way that they've treated girls has never never been discussed. That was never part of the story. And I think that, you know, hoping between just a changing world, you know, like the Me Too movement, moments like watching the undoing of Diddy and watching it just be so irrefutable that you can't defend him because now we literally have him on camera stomping Cassie out, you know, with the rise of women in hip hop taking up more space than they have arguably ever before. We can say, okay, the way you treat women and children matters. You know, it matters if you're.
Let me push back a little bit because I hope you're right, by the way. But it seemed to me that the thing that knocked Diddy out of here wasn't the Cassie thing. I mean, that was certainly devastating, but it's hard to know because Diddy was already kind of out of here by the time the Cassie video comes out. It seems to me that most of the world, particularly the men in hip hop that were talking about Diddy, they weren't talking about how he treated women. They weren't talking about the allegations of the underage girl being sexually assaulted in the studio. They weren't talking about the decades of allegations against Diddy that were credible. It seemed like most people were talking about him being gay. Right, it seemed like the no Diddy thing was the thing that got people going. You know what I mean? And I guess that concerns me. And with Kendrick, it's like there's this moment where he's talking about Mr. Morale and and all this stuff and family and communication and treating women right. But when he does the pop out show, the first person on stage to introduce They're Not Like Us is Dr. Dre, who assaulted D Barnes, what maybe the most famous hip hop assault that we know of. Right, so I'm like, I don't know. I hope that this is a new turn. I just don't know that I'm nervous that it's not.
I'm nervous too. You know, I want to be optimistic, and I think this is going to have a lot to do with how female listeners react, right? Because we're going to have to be the ones to say these guardrails exist now and this matters, you know, and we're going to have to be loud about it because you're right. Men in particular, when it came to Diddy, didn't have much to say until the gay allegations came out. And then, you know, we're ready to be done with him. Prior to that, it was, you know, protect this black man. They're trying to tear him down, his legacy, his legacy, his legacy. And the Cassie video did silence a lot of that talk because it then became something that you couldn't deny. But until we have footage, you know, most of the guys that I mentioned in the story with these accusations of violence, including Dre and D Barnes, there's no footage. We haven't seen it. Right. And so we've always treated these things as he said, she said. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened.
Right. Even when Dre makes a song or Eminem makes a song with Dre where he says, you know what I mean? I'm gonna take advice from a dude to slap D Barnes. You know what I mean? Dre doesn't deny that he slapped D Barnes. And yet the public, like you said, will become willfully ignorant of it. We just pretend it didn't happen. Like it wasn't a secret room. It was a whole bunch of people in that room. And of course, I did an interview with D Barnes and she talks about it right here on the channel, as well as elsewhere. So I think you're right. I think we should be cautiously optimistic. But part of the work I think that all of us have to do is to not just wait to see what happens, but to push that agenda forward. We can change the narrative so that rappers want to call people deadbeats dad. We should be the ones making being a deadbeat dad not cool. We should be the ones making being a poor partner not cool. We should be the ones making all these things not cool. That's the work we can do too. And your article goes a long way of helping us do that work. Everybody, make sure you check out Jamilah Lemieux's brilliant article in Vanity Fair, where she breaks down all the science on hip hop, all the science on Kendrick, all the science on gender politics. And the best part, She does it from the principal perspective of a Drake hater.